Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Today's session, we have our moderator, Mr. Suresh Mahalingam. He is an independent director and member of the audit committee for Principal Asset Management Private Limited. With over 3 decades of experience in BFSI and FMCG sectors, he was previously the non-executive director with WGC, managing director and CEO of Tata AIA Insurance, and has led ITC and HDFC Life at senior leadership roles. Thank you, Mr. Mahalingam, for joining to this conversation. We have Ms. Annapurna Das. She joined Sanofi Pasteur as country head vaccines, South Asia and India, and comes with over 2 decades of strategic and operational experience in the healthcare industry in India and South Asian markets. She has led in several roles in sales, marketing, corporate strategy, and business development, and has worked across diverse therapeutic areas in primary care, critical care, and specialty, and vaccines. Thank you, ma'am, for joining this conversation. I leave the floor now open to you both for today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dejansh. So, welcome on board, Annapurna. We look forward to a engaging conversation with you. Let me kind of put the guidelines. I think we will learn a lot rather than ask you questions. We'll only ask you questions to kind of get the best out of you. The purpose of this interaction is to try and find how leaders are coping up with multiple challenges, not just COVID, but looking at the world from a different perspective. We will intertwine some of the questions based on pharma, and then would like the entire interaction to be interactive to the extent that we will not get into theoretical concepts on leadership, but we would like to look at practical aspects of how you see, based on your experience over multiple companies, what are some learnings that you can give to our listeners? What can tomorrow's managers pick up cues in terms of how to handle crisis, how to handle strategy, how to handle people, how to handle a whole host of things. But we will center it around pharma so that we gain a lot of experience from what you have achieved so far. So just to kickstart the process, Annapurna, if you'll allow me, I would like to ask you questions regarding the pharma industry. What are the new trends that you see revolutionizing the pharma industry, and what kind of impact will it have? And therefore, for a country like India, what are the emerging opportunities for a country like India? You work for a very big brand, and you've been in the country for so many years, and your own experience of the pharmaceutical industry is pretty intense. So I think insights from you would be extremely welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Suresh. It's a pleasure to be talking to you and talking to the listeners who have joined this webinar today evening. Let me set some expectations first. I think all that I'll try to share what I know. I'm not expert on pharma by any means, but whatever comes to my mind, whatever I have learned over these years, I will share. By no means I'm a very generalist, so what comes to mind, I will share. Getting to your question, what are the trends in pharma? I think some trends, let me most generalize rather than talk about the crisis we are going through. I think pharma, the biggest trend, I think that everyone, and we have been working in the industry, is the adoption and better adherence of chronic care. So chronic, when we talk about chronic care, we mostly talk about diseases like diabetes or hypertension. Of course, the burden of disease is high. I think India, as you know, is called the diabetes capital of the world. But more importantly, what we see that with the improvement in terms of your awareness and with improvement of people seeking advice and diagnosis, and then there is a better adherence to that. I think that's one big trend where people kind of coming up and getting that. The second trends, or if I keep thinking about the other trends that important, I think a significant amount of focus has been, and I think the current times like the COVID-19 crisis will only accelerate is focused on well-being and health care as such, kind of focusing on really on your well-being and living healthy life. I think that's where a lot of our services, and that's where you see and well-being, whether it's good exercise, and I will not link it to, but healthy eating, healthy exercise, and kind of a good nutritional, that's kind of a significant trend. That impacts pharma because pharma is more holistic. It's just not treatment, but it's of course more well-being, preventive and treatment altogether. And I would kind of call out one more significant trend is how the health tech is kind of accelerating and changing the interactions between healthcare and patient, healthcare practitioners and patients, physicians and patients, as well as what is the interactions it happens between a pharma company and a physician. But let me kind of focus and zoom in more about the healthcare and the patients. I think the clinical care paradigm is shifting. There is a lot more patients who are coming who have read about the disease, they are aware, they are seeking more time. That's one piece. Then there is health tech, which helps physicians to actually keep much better track of the health parameters, health statistics of their patients. So whether you talk about electronics medical records or kind of using app and technology to do the better diagnosis, I think that's pretty much happening. And then not to forget about the other biggest trend which has helped us most in the last 100 odd days is the virtual clinic or the teleconsultation bit. So while I think that these are therefore I bucket them as kind of a broad health tech related trends which is impacting pharma. So principally where you will find your patients, how they will seek care from physicians is changing, and how the care will get delivered to the patients from physicians is also changing. So these are the kind of broad trends that I think of when I look at the industry today.
Interesting that you bring this perspective. So if I were to synthesize what you're trying to say in a layman's perspective for people like us who probably don't know the pharma industry, clearly I see a lot of innovation that is happening, whether it's patient care, whether it's technology, whether it's a whole host of the ecosystem. Clearly you see areas of innovation that's happening. There is also a swing from treatment to prevention. I can see it from a perspective. I also see a lot of focus on diagnostic and cure, and therefore what is the correlation between diagnostic and cure. Yeah. And clearly, as you did mention, there are new therapies that are groundbreaking, therapies that are being formulated or being introduced. But more importantly, as you've been indicating, there is a consumerization when you talk about the patient care or the interaction between the doctors and the patients. There's a lot of consumerization that one is seeing, and I also see a lot of data that is being used from a perspective of looking at how to build strong ecosystems. Now, having said that, and based on the insight, Annapurna, that you mentioned, how do leaders like you, who have 2 decades of experience, and I'm not talking about COVID necessarily, but how do leaders like you, understand this impact, and what do you see that you will do to change things forward as a leader to be seen as impactful and effective? And if you could relate some examples that
So let me kind of frame this into 2 bits. One is what you talk about your business or technical skill sets or how you deal with that, and maybe the other part is more about your the way you lead or the way you interact, way you work with the organization. That's
absolutely. Yeah. What would you look as a leader right now?
What would I look at is that, so first thing what I have realized over the years, and this is, I think, that if we are able to get diverse set of people to the table, your ability to do and run your business and understand your business transforms significantly. And maybe I'll kind of try to also give you some anecdotes and some examples from my journey. So first thing I will say that if from a business understanding perspective, understanding business landscape and anticipating the scenarios, that what it is important is most important. Therefore, in order to do that, you need to have a very, very diverse group of people in your team. So first thing is that's how good are you in anticipating today and how good are you in anticipating tomorrow. That's, I think, is significantly important in doing business decisions. The second one, which I always keep saying, is that while you start building solutions for today, a good bit of your time should also start kind of lensing what will you keep you ready tomorrow. I'm giving some generic answers, but maybe I will just zooming in like that. So pretty much the way I work is that this is what is my 90 days framework of doing things. Then what do I do? Kind of come zoom in 90 days, then go to 180 days, and go to 360, and then go to 2 years and 3 years. I pretty much personally, I do not start with this big ticket thing that where I want to be after 5 years. Honestly, it's very uncertain. I think the variables change very fast. So the framework for me is zoom in now and then keep zooming out and coming back to your today so that you can keep layering up with that. So that's the second bit that I always look at it, that are you able to really build solutions which help your today's problems, but also in terms of what helps you in tomorrow? The last bit, which is important, is you can never build a business if you do not have subject matter expertise. So that's kind of links back to my first point again, that get the right set of subject matter experts along with building a diverse team. And that's what's important from a business acumen piece. So planning in terms of that, getting the right set of subject matters and the diversity of this. As far as it comes to, and we had that chat the other day, and I was thinking about this diversity piece a little bit.
Yeah. So, in fact, that's a question that I had coming.
Yeah.
Please go
no,
ahead.
Not diversity for anything else, but more importantly, I'll kind of zoom now, start going back to the organization bit, diversity in collaboration. I think that's principle, that if in an organization I'm able to drive collaboration by bringing different kinds of people, whether for decision making, whether for innovation, I'm far better off while doing this business. And this is very close to my heart before I start saying how do I is that. So I'll give you an example, which I said, when we go through in my team, I am pretty new to the team, relatively new to the team. I have a scientist and my medical director, Dr. Badri Narayan Patnaik. And Badri is a scientist. He works as a medical director for Sanofi Pasteur in South Asia and India. I always invite him for all commercial discussions, and kind of I don't think he enjoys it too much, but he sits through. And then the kind of questions he asks, that kind of pretty much shakes us up. And my business teams, which is purely sales or marketeers, are sitting there, or senior leaders are saying. And I think that kind of an interaction actually completely shakes up the over familiarity of business, because the moment you become over familiar with your businesses, and then you start losing the nuances of seeing things beyond the obvious. I think that's the very, very core concept for me in terms of diversity and collaboration. Coming to the second part, you asked me that what do I do as a leader? First thing, I assimilate very frequent and very often and very frequent, which is keep coming back and saying, what do we know and what is impacting my business and what's impacting my organization and my people very quickly, that what were the assumptions, what has changed. And this today is not a monthly review or a quarterly review or anything, but a leadership which is a day-to-day kind of, what is that changed from yesterday today, what was assumption is that, and then pretty much start working on it, that what has changed, and then start working. I think I particularly don't wait for decisions after having 100% clarity what the environment will be. So I pretty much move on and assimilate fast, move fast, and take action on what you know. That brings to the other part of it, that I kind of pretty much encourage people to go and fail. It's okay, as long as you have done and you kind of said that let's do this, and no one is going to kind of being said that this is what I have failed, so that's kind of the second piece, is that encouraging people and giving them that safety, that go ahead and do, is if you fail, I'm here, not to worry. I think that's a very significant element. That's one. third, my leadership, if I define one thing which I do very often and all the time, is being resource for my team. Because I think today, and I call this is my favorite line. One of my people tease me. I don't think we have room for supervisors in this world. Okay, we don't have room for people for this world. We have people who will work together, sit together, hang together, drink beer together on a Friday evening, but fundamentally being a resource to your team, who can step in, who can follow a team or lead a team. It doesn't matter where you are, but be a resource to this team to solve what problems they have and kind of find resources. We are large organizations. We need to hunt for resources. We compete for resources. And if you can be that resource to your team, I think that's the least I can do for my team. So these are principally from the way I operate in the organization, whether in business or in people. I think broad frameworks.
I can see the passion, emerging out of years and years of experience, and these are very clearly practical examples of running an organization. But having said that, again, coming back to the issue in terms of the changing trends and the impact, and whilst what you indicated to a large extent does signify how you run organizations, how you lead people, how you move towards transformation. If there are one or two new attributes that possibly you would want to indicate for the kind of impact that you're talking about, on the industry going forward, especially in these challenging times, are there any attributes? For example, very cliched leadership traits, which, when the cows can come home, we can discuss agility, flexibility, authenticity, thought and courage, humility. We've heard people, speaking at length about some of these virtues in terms of what leadership. And I'm not disagreeing with any of these. In your own practical experience, if you were to pick one, I mean, you may want to repeat what you said a little while ago itself, but if you were to pick one that can be seen as a key differentiator that can make things effective, what would it be and why?
Fungibility.
Okay, and
I will say fungibility because, again, it's whether it is now or 6 months before or 6 months after. I think pretty much what would make a leader successful, or I think success is, leave apart, effective. Let me stick to the word effective. What would be really being effective if we are able to build fungibility, and fungibility being reflected in how we build scenarios and options, business solutions or people solutions, which can withstand any kind of a scenario that might come up. So that's why I say fungibility. Fungibility is your ability to apply your skills and your nuances and your understanding, your emotions, your intelligence, whatever it is, to build and help build organization or people solutions which can withstand irrespective of the potential scenarios that can come up. And I think that's supremely important in my view. And I always hunt for young people who are fungible. And it's not important whether you have worked in pharma, whether you worked in marketing or that. Do you have these core skill sets where you can say, these could be potentially what could be happening. This can happen, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. And can I build something, whether it's a set of solution or a competence set, which will make me succeed or remain relevant, whatever happens. And that's, in my view, is far more important. If I have to choose between articulate, super confident, and very experienced person and fungible, someone who is fungible, I'll always opt for fungibility. It's a very important trait to win and continue to win.
Very interesting that you say that, because I agree with you. It's an important attribute of leadership that people actually do not talk too much, but when you actually apply it and really demonstrate it, the impact and the results and the outcomes that you get out of it is really, and I've seen that through my own experience over the years. I'm coming back to the industry a little, and then I'll go back to leadership attributes later. very clearly one reads a lot beyond the pill, and that's become a normal phrase that when you talk about the pharma industry, is it moving away from just prescription to, what lies beyond? A lot of changes have happened on multiple industries, and be it technology, be it digital transformation, be it a whole host of data information that you get, and the very approach, and therefore the cliche beyond the pill. What are the key drivers that you think from going from a pill to a complete solution, and what should industry champions like your organization or industry leaders such as you should do or should be looking at? And does this make sense at all? I mean, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
It makes sense. I think you're right. Sometimes the word beyond the pill.
Just a minute, Annapurna, before you come, participants, you can post your questions as I interact with Annapurna, and after the interaction happens, we'll take your questions. We'll ask Annapurna. So please post your questions. Sorry, Annapurna,
Sure. I think beyond the pill is a very nice word. I think fundamentally this word came from the pharma industry's intent to really support patients' health outcome beyond just being providing for medicine. So I think pharma industry works on very strong pillar of availability, accessibility, awareness. So I think all these three A's keep kind of working together: awareness, access, and availability. But stepping back beyond the pill, genesis was that how do I become more relevant and how do I drive better health outcome? So that was the principle from that. So I'm a good student of marketing. Okay, so I always go back to my marketing days and remember saying that, what is the patient journey? And that's what I think people are doing in the patient journey platform, and saying what all places or what are the interactions or touch points with patients which can actually help the patient or actually help me as an organization to deliver better care and better outcome from that medicine or a vaccine that you take. So this, I think several things are happening today in pharma. I think first of all, the principally a lot in the chronic care is around adherence, and technology has really helped us to do the adherence, whether it is helping you to keep a track of your heart rate or helping you to predict whether you are at a risk of a heart cardiac arrest or how is your sugar levels going to fluctuate. I think a lot of this propositions are around adherence for chronic diseases. So that because a chronic care patient lives with that's everything proposition is happening there. That's number one. The other piece which is very important is around the diagnostic piece, because and today morning also there was one entrepreneur talking to me, is that a huge burden of the disease happens because of misdiagnosis, underdiagnosis, or delayed diagnosis. I think this is something, a big ticket item, and I think the focus has always been in terms of focusing on really disease areas which were more complex, where diagnosis was more complicated. But today the focus is also on simple diseases and day-to-day acute care related diseases. What kind of an infection is it? And that's where I think the whole work is around diagnostic support, whether to the HCP or creating the right awareness level at the patient level, so that the clinic seeking behavior, the behavior of the patient coming to the physician changes. And we see this in vaccines all the time. So let me bring this one interesting fact, and is that we see this in vaccines all the time. So I'll give you an example of influenza vaccination. So for flu, what's kind of the flu vaccine, in a country like ours, I think it's primarily kind of being sought by babies, young primaries as we call about younger babies, then 2 to 5 year old kids, pregnant mothers, really people who have high burden of any comorbidity risk. But what we see now today, and today it's interesting to see that especially almost 5 times to 6 times surge we see in terms of people seeking and asking about influenza vaccine, which means that the awareness that you create ultimately kind of changes the way the people go and seek vaccine behavior, the way they go and ask for vaccines. And that itself is a proposition itself, and that itself is a beyond the pill, because I just do not offer the vaccine, but also help change the behavior or an attitude towards a category and the way that's being seen. So I think these are fundamentally, I think, so people start from the top of that patient journey, that from a patient who is completely unaware to the patient who is going and seeking a pill, and intervene at different places. And all, I think today I think not so much in India, but if you look at abroad, I think a lot of patient care is anchored around predefined health outcome, that also your payers are also more attaching that what kind of a health outcome you can offer from the therapy that you bring to the table. And all this is happening in beyond the pill. So several diabetes program, allergy program, awareness programs, vaccine advice program are linked towards beyond the pill. Today everything health tech is doing a lot of it, I see. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, so how are large pharma institutions, companies adapting? Because, there is a legacy system, and, we're so used to a certain legacy way of doing things, but you're big, and suddenly you see the entire trends changing, in terms of developing innovative ecosystems and all. How do you see the blending happening, and what is required to adapt? I see this problem in the financial services industry, where banks are used to good old legacy systems, but then we're talking about a digital era and transformation of consumer behavior and so on and so forth. How do you see this entire ecosystem play beyond, in the definition of beyond the pill? I mean, how are organizations like yours tackling it?
Yeah. So interesting. I think let me kind of divide it into a couple of pieces, because the whole journey of patient, our product reaching a patient or an HCP is in two parts. So first of all, when it's come to a patient and an HCP interaction, we have an important role to play, because we are providing our therapies or the kind of information so that the HCP is able to recommend or treat and diagnose and treat and make the right recommendation to the physician. I think here we are transforming a lot, because traditionally the interactions have been all face-to-face. Our sales force have walked into clinics, and it's not because of COVID, but even pretty much for the last couple of years, pharma is creating much more interaction with physicians. Not just one way, both ways, global and India, through several digital platforms. So today, when we talk about an HCP and a pharma interaction, it is face-to-face, it is on various digital expert forums, it's on what we typically call on third-party promotional platforms. So what has transformed is the way we deliver information to our HCPs. So earlier it used to be only through your sales force or through a face-to-face event. Today that whole delivery has changed. So you pretty much go to, if I follow a customer, I talk to somebody in HDFC, and the way any consumer is being followed, I think we also look at HCPs and saying what platforms are being used by HCPs, which kind of content is being sought by HCP, what will help me deliver that scientific value for HCP so that the right information goes. So this whole interaction is changing. Today we do a significant chunk of our events digitally, and that's the way the world to be. This also has transformed the bringing in of global and national or the country-based experts together, because your exchanges, I think we could be talking on Zoom, such large in scientific platforms through Zoom platforms. I think so. This is much more changed. What is again changing is the kind of partnerships that national HCP bodies would have with pharma companies. Today, a majority of these are focusing on either using technology to create awareness for the patients, so that you work with HCP bodies and associations, so and you deliver that science, that awareness to the patients, because it makes much more sense and much more credible when your scientists and scientific experts are talking about treatment and therapies. So I think those associations and partnerships are changing. What more technology? I think we have. Yeah, so I think now if you look at today, most of the patient support programs or access programs are technology based. Many of the distribution systems, so and pharma is not just physicians and patients, but we also have a huge role of our channel, our distribution network.
I have a question on distribution later, but I'm going to shift and get you on a lighter mode now.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
complete and then I'll get you.
That's also is changing. It's changing. But the major focus today in health tech is on getting a 360-degree view of the patient data, so that you're not struggling with that. If this patient came in January 2018 and came back, what is that? So that's the first thing that you are building there. I think the other piece which is going to build, and we haven't seen, is the disease surveillance. I think how the technology is going to build the disease surveillance. I think that's the other piece of the work. Yeah, I gave a little.
It's okay. It's very interesting. Annapurna, I'm going to shift from serious questions to a little bit of a listening questions. How are you coping up with mental health, physical health, and overall well-being in these challenging times? That's the first question addressed to you as a leader.
Okay, you as a leader. Let me talk about first me as a wife. Okay.
Absolutely. First as a wife, then as a leader.
As a wife. So it's funny, and I was telling my husband. So when we got into these interesting times, cocooning times, jokes apart, but then he said, okay, I will give you one big ask of yours that I have. And I said, what's it? He said, I will give you 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night where you can ask me anything. AMA session. I said, that's nice. After 20 years, you realize that. Yeah, the jokes apart. How I'm coping up with mental health, physical health. Overall, I think physical health, I realized very quickly after 10 days that you can't go to gym, you can't go out, so you need to get something. So wonderfully, I started with yoga, and I'm really enjoying. I think that's my physical health bit of it. I'm not a big into sports, but something which keeps my mind alert more than anything is doing something which kind of awakens me in the morning. I think more from the mental health, I think and let me be honest, I think I've gone through several phases, and it's not that, I got it right and it's being really nice, and that initial phase was really like stormy. You don't know how to plan your work. You don't know when you start, when you end, and also a lot of things to solve on a day-to-day basis. I think all of us experience this thing because nobody has seen a pandemic ever. Correct? Nobody. I don't think any business school or any business, any kind of a training was given that what is pandemic, and nobody taught us that I get up one morning and say I am pandemic ready. So I think from a mental health, what honestly we started doing in the initial phase was we started with the phase where we were speaking to each other at office all the time, like from morning to evening, and everybody had a jam-packed Zoom. This was the first phase. Was it helping mentally? I think in the hindsight, when I look at it, actually it helped because you were not missing anybody physically. To be honest, we've been used to going to office every day. I think then we slowly titrated and we said, no, I think we need our own time. We are overwhelming on Zoom, and I think we are on a Zoom platform. So that kind of change. So I think then we started reshaping and saying that how much time do we need to spend and meeting each other and talking to each other, and how much time we need to start segregating that, start doing things, or start focusing on individual stuff that you want to do. I think that helped a lot. I think that segregation, I know you asked about mental, that segregation started cleaning up the space. It took some time. I think first couple of weeks were like little crazy. It took some good amount of time. And last, and I will not underplay this one, is hanging out with no purpose. Okay, you just talk and chat without having an objective or an agenda. Okay, so I get my LT all together and we just chat and hang, and that one. And I love seeing all the kids at the home of my colleagues and they waving in the Zoom. I think this has helped the mental health. I think
very nice.
It has really helped. Let's remember, because we are intruding homes, children are not. Okay, we are bringing office, so it was. I think that helped a lot. We got into talking to each other, so we moved from a power-packed agenda discussions all the time to having conversations with no purpose. We're having conversations where there was not an agenda or not a crisis we were handling, and getting that phase back, that we are no more in crisis. This is the way it is, and kind of I'm not saying we're no more in crisis, but this is the way we like, and that has calmed, I believe, all of us a little bit and helped in keeping our sanity checked. But the best part is looking at the children on Zoom. I really enjoy that.
No, it's very nice. It's very interesting, and the way you said it. So, extending on the same question, okay, and working from home, how have you engaged with your employees? How has their morale been? I know there's been a lot of calls to Zoom, telephone calls. And the essential question is, how do you keep? The question is larger from a communication perspective. How do you keep it efficient? How do you keep it effective and to a minimum? We love to talk, we love to get engaged, right? And these are, when you're not physically seeing each other, yet you need to be effective. And so, how have you managed that? Because this is a large organization.
Pretty much the same. I don't think I got it right, or many of my others, we didn't get it right in the beginning. We were all struggling that. So we really started from a very place of over communication. I think the mistake we can do by under communicating, I think you are still better by over communicating. Say we are there. I think be very clear that nothing matters more than the safety of our people, because we are pharma, and we are essential commodities. So our factories were working, our supply chain was working, nothing stops. So we had to really be ensuring that our people are safe. That's the most important, and the second, that our supplies are available. So I think for us, the purpose was very clear. It was not diluted. It was very clear that these are the two purposes, that these are the two clear priorities we have in this phase. With that in mind, and when I come back and say work from home, I think personally I started with over communication, which means keep talking, keep creating as many touch points with people, and start giving them all the information in that, number one. Number two, start also acknowledging that it's not easy, because for us, for everyone, so we have sales teams who go out every day to work. Their work changed, and they started doing, they were at home. So over communicating was the beginning. Acknowledging that everybody had challenges of whether it is child care, elderly care, household chores, and work, acknowledging that bit. And most importantly, I think not just from India or my team, I think principally our organization gave us a lot of comfort that it's not about saying you need to log in at that time, you need to log out that time, but creating that comfort of trust and saying, we trust you, we know you will do the right things, and we're not telling you log in at that time and log out that time. I think that helped a lot to create that comfort in employees. Communication bit, we started little haphazard, but then we have planned, we do town halls, we do digital coffees, digital celebrations, digital farewell, digital everything we are doing in that. So it's business. It's a lot of things that we would do physically. We have converted into digital, and with the simple narrative that it has to go on and we have to remain connected. Yeah. So one line answer is started with over communication, and then finally we are reaching an optimal balance.
So that this is what people talk about, the new normal, I guess. This is the way things will move forward. So I have a couple of more questions. I think we've been having a very interesting 40 minutes of conversation. I'm aware that we need to close this in 45 minutes. I'll just take some questions from the audio, from the participants, and then I'll come back and ask you a few more questions. So let me just go through the questions. And I told you there will be a question on vaccine, and there is a question. I will, although, how far are we away from the COVID vaccine? Is 2020 too optimistic?
2020?
Yeah, it's end of 2020 is what I would guess. It's too optimistic.
Yeah, so all I can share with my understanding, and which is fairly limited, and I think there are several candidates in the world which are being pursued they are in development phase. All of them are in different phase of development. I think all I can say that vaccines development is a long process. It's I think most of the vaccines players or companies are focusing on getting it an accelerated way. Government is supporting that. But I would say it will still take us some more time. It's still take us a reasonable time to ensure and get those vaccines to the market. This is purely my personal view. Again, I said I'm not an R&D expert, but I believe it will take us some more time to get the vaccine to the market. Any vaccine, and multiple players are working on that.
Okay, good. Now, one more question from the participants, which is also linked to a question that I had for you. Typically, in every organization talks about purpose, about culture. Living those purpose, living the culture, or actually implementing that culture on a consistent basis is a challenge for most organizations. So very often it's loosely, this is our culture, this is the way we do things, and so on and so forth. In the current context of the becoming bigger, challenging situation, is there a sense to repurpose, broadly? Yes, no. I mean, personally, I don't think you need to, but I'm just saying, is there a need to repurpose given the changing dynamics? And if so, what are the cultural attributes of the purpose that needs change? Because one behavioral change that we're seeing culturally is we are working from home. I'm just a broad example. And therefore, the ability in terms of the way we handle our stakeholders is very different from, let's say, operating from a different environment. So therefore, do you see challenges in terms of repurposing culture, or you see some tweaks, or even if you can define, how do you see culture building in the current scenario?
Yeah, that's a long. Let me see if I try to.
And you can break it up. I mean, essentially, purpose, culture.
So purpose and culture. In my personal view, I think purpose should be a bit of a sacrosanct. I think it does get repurposed as time progresses, as environment. But let me focus what I know is from pharma or a healthcare. I think making the innovation, making your products available to your patients and making it accessible and available is more important. I think that purpose doesn't change. I think that from a pharma's purpose, healthcare, basic healthcare outcome purpose doesn't change. When it comes to culture, I think is a set of and when I look at culture as an English word, I think set of behaviors and things that we need to kind of constantly demonstrate, which kind of talks about the environment you stay in. Of course, I think cultural priorities do change, and that doesn't change because your environment has changed, or the pretty much that there are certain behaviors within the organization, or within just not organization, within any unit. It could be within a family, within any unit where a set of people are working together. I think culture needs to be repurposed, because if I have a set of behaviors, and I'm oversimplifying it, Suresh, if I have a set of behaviors which can be loosely termed as my culture, is counterproductive to my relevance and to my competence and growth and my sustenance in the environment, I need to change. That's very simple. And I'll bring one very sharp business example here, is that today in this world, if we have a completely the whole optimism level of consumers and purchasing behavior, income levels, all this start changing, I think we will have to internally start looking at our behaviors that define our day-to-day business choices and decisions, because unless I change that, I will not be able to be successful in my new operating model. So for example, I will say that one simple that we always thought, I'm giving an example, it's not relevant to any organization. So the whole culture of making the best in time product was my culture, and that said that we defined that quality is my best as a key behavior I drive. I want people to have best benchmarks or best quality outcome in this. And if I go for an environment where people are looking at more speed-based product and my customers' needs and asks have changed, while I'm not going to say that I will dilute quality, but definitely speed to response to customer will be also equally important. And that will need a completely different set of behaviors, because my matrix will change. So this is a very concrete example that if your customer asks, if your business asks change, you will have to repurpose your culture. And at the same time, and it might sound cliche, I would never take away the strengths of an organization, because I have grown up in wonderful organizations where there is so much focus on the legacy and the culture which has got us there, but at the same time layering it up with new things and different things that can take there. So some organizations might say, do things where you ensure that you are first time right. That's one culture. Versus another organization saying, don't worry, even if you are not first time right, you're okay, you will fail, I'm okay, I'm here, go and do it. So these are two very different cultures. Very, very different set of cultures, first time right, best quality, first time right, versus go, fail, get it done, you will come back. So I think this repurposing will happen. And I don't think I have one answer fits all, that it is organization based, life stage of the organization, and this will get. It's very, very organization specific. There's no right or wrong culture. Did I answer?
Of course you did. Of course you did. So therefore, a leading question to what you stated, if there are one or two things that you would possibly want to do that you have not done it, but you always want to do, given the going forward, what would you do? Anything that you always wanted to do, but you couldn't do with your team, with the way you looked at things, any attribute, anything in which you feel your desire is to do it. There's always this worry.
So I'll tell you what, and not that, I'll be honest here, it's not a choice that, or I wanted to do, but this is an outcome of what I have gone through. So I'm this blue person, okay, who wants to look at data, looks at structures, and get me some more insights, tell me what customers saying, tell me what HCP behavior, etc., is that. One thing, I think a lot of these frameworks have got totally shattered, because today I don't have data, okay? I don't have data, I do not have too much of insights, and I don't have the luxury of not making decisions. So what has really shaken me up is saying that this all your decision making frameworks and what all that you thought and you learned and you were proud of got kind of shattered, because I had to go back and say, okay, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is probably the decision I am making, but let me still make it.
Sure.
This is very different me, and this is very different me than I have lived all my life. And this is a discovery, self-discovery. And
being very honest and open. I really appreciate that you're being honest and open.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Yeah, that's really one thing. Yeah, because I
you
would
have some more. If you have some more, please go ahead.
And this is another very favorite phase of mine, and has got another completely got dismantled. I would always ask this, tell me some measures, tell me what would good look like, and tell me how we were going to measure this. And is that again a blue percent? And got completely challenged. Okay, what good looks like, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. And pushing me and more towards that. And if maybe when I'm thinking about this, towards that, it's okay to be having that lack of confidence and vulnerability and saying, I don't know, but based on what I know, this is probably what it looked like, and this is what I will do. I think that making those kind of choices, I often feel that, and I know transformation is close to your heart, Suresh. Transformation, and purely my view, transformation is sometimes overrated. With all due respect to all the transformation agents, because it's a series of small little things, and I realized it never before as stronger in the last 100 days. Series of small little things that you go through one by one on day to day, and you transform without even thinking and having that trauma and pain of transformation. So these are a couple of things I discovered. I got my whole blue thing got completely shattered now.
Annapurna, I have more questions, but I'm also looking at the time. I'm going back to some questions posted by the participants. Let me take one or two more questions. When the COVID initially hit the healthcare sector, what was your thought process to handle the sudden surge in operations and motivate your team?
Very interesting question. As I think I mentioned, is that we had very, very clear two sets of priorities, that how to keep your team safe. And I think the whole safety was so important. I don't think the focus was on any other parameter of productivity, efficient, effectiveness, all the usual business metrics. Nothing was of priority. What's that? How do you keep your people safe, for their safety, their families safe, and do not contribute to the rise of infection? I think that was very clear. So we moved out. Actually, we kind of moved out much earlier than the national lockdown. We started work from home. I think that became very clear. And we did everything to ensure that my team is going back, they're working from home, they're feeling comfortable, what they need to do, etc. The other single most priority, and as a vaccines players too, that was to ensure supplies. Singular focus became on supplies, because for me it's very important, and for our whole team it's very important, that if whether vaccination is happening today or not, but if any child in the remotest part of Bihar needs one meningococcal vaccine, and if it is not available, I don't think I've done a good job. And that became it was very simple, because your yardstick of working 24/7 was to ensure those supplies. Sure. How did you get that? So it was imports, clearance, supplies, managing the supplies, and I think teams did phenomenal job. Our supply chain, our channel partners, I think government stakeholders, everybody. I think everybody rallied to that. So I think we kept it simple. We kept it focused on these two things, and that's what we worked.
Terrific. So let me take one more question. According to you, which leadership skill has become the most critical skill in this new normal environment era? You've answered the question, but maybe you would like to state it again.
Yeah, I talked about fungibility, which is about scenario planning is very, very critical. If I have to give a very good management word to do some justice, speaking has invited me. So, so scenario planning and planning that what kind of choices and will make you fungible, that whichever scenario happens, you are successful.
Okay, one more question, Annapurna. What will be the ways of working, of doing business in the new normal once markets open up?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. First of all, there is no finite date that this is a day when everything will be as it was. XYZ 2020 is this that. So we all have to realize that there's no finite date to this. Having said that, of course, I think with such wide control measures, collective work that governments, communities, HCPs, everybody doing, rates of infections would come under control. We would become better. We would learn how to kind of manage this, curb the spread infection. There would be time when we would really get back. However, I see that some things will remain the norm and that is where what it will change, that new ways of working, that a lot of, and I read about this also, a lot of people could continue to stay at home and what's called, if I forget that word, home body economy, as they say. That's it. A lot of people could still stay at home and look for availing food, entertainment, education is that. So that could be a way of working, and that would impact our operating models across that. And I was reading about these online channels which became offline, and offline channels like your kirana, your shop bhajiwala on the road became online. So I think it will become the way of working. There will be far more channels by which people will stay at home and get their things and stuff. I don't think that's going to change. Way of social distancing to avail and out in the community will become the way of will become a way of life. I don't think that's going to change something so suddenly is that. So I think principally these are two things which come to my mind in terms of ways of working.
Will distribution models change?
Distribution model will change because your operating model might change. That's what I talked about. That so principally, if people who went out every Saturday night to have a dinner, and if they continue to now kind of get similar experiences at home, so again going back to the word home, whether it is food, entertainment, health, education, exercise, whatever, well-being, I think it's not just about Netflix or Spotify or something, but it's much everything that you want to enjoy at home. Your distribution model has to change. Your scale of economies will go through a change, because what gets delivered at an X cost to one location, which was a restaurant, I'm just taking that example, gets to be delivered in 10 homes or 30 homes. There is a difference in the cost of delivery. There is a difference. This whole mechanism has to work. So I think, yes, answering your question, ways of working will change, where consumers and how they want to buy things. What they buy things will also definitely have an impact. And I think social distancing as a norm will exist for some time till we become, whenever we all become protected against the disease. Distribution and operating models will change. But today we are also looking at it, where are my customers going to go and get their vaccines from? Are we ready with that operating model? And that's going to change here. So I'll give you one.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, one interesting example, that we all thought that being able to centralize and create synergies in distribution was the best thing. But something like crisis actually made us nimble, and they say the closest we are to the customer, the more we are agile and nimble. And that kind of shifted your whole thinking of synergy and consolidation to saying, let's be closest to the customers. So that changed your thinking.
Annapurna, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. In fact, I have immensely benefited. And I think what one sees in you is, what I see in you is a real practical orientation of leadership and examples coming in from hard, having done it, seen it, more than concepts. And that's exactly what we wanted to get from you. And you covered a wide spectrum, right from the trends that are emerging in the industry, to consumer behavior, to leadership traits, to purpose and culture. And these are some of the true things that people should look for in leaders, and especially a person of your caliber and your intelligence and your experience. I think you have shared a lot, and I'm sure given some more time, we could have asked you some more questions. Having said that, thank you so much. Thank you for all the participants who viewed it. I would now like, if you'd like to say a few things as closing remarks, Annapurna, please go ahead.
No, my pleasure, Suresh. It's an honor to be talking to you and share this platform with you. Thank you to speak in. And as I said in the beginning, I don't think I have any novelty to add. It's just my experiences, some journeys, some anecdotes and stories. So all I would say, all of you remain safe, remain curious, assimilate every day, and keep going. I think that's most important in this phase. And at the end of the day, I feel we are blessed to be all here talking, connected, and having this opportunity to remain connected. I think it's indeed a blessing, and I'm thank you for all of you who joined, and I'm sure we will have more opportunities to talk someday. Be safe.
Thank you, Annapurna. Thank you, Annapurna. Thank you, speaking, and thank you all the participants. We thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for taking the time, Annapurna. And stay safe, stay home.